So we've looked at identities, we've looked at narratives, now let's look at norms. And one norm that's been researched recently is norms towards violence. There's a brilliant book by Steve Pinker called The Better Angels of Our Nature, which describes the gradual reduction in violence over the last 2,000 years. I'll take a couple of examples from Steve Pinker. One is very specific. It's about the end of dueling in Europe. Dueling was where if you insulted me, I would challenge you to a duel, and we would fight either with swords or with pistols to the death, unless both of us missed. Now, that had persisted 4 generations, and what was particularly pernicious about dueling was that, of course, I'd win, you'd be dead, but then your son would pick up the cause. And so this will become a vendetta between your family and my family that rolled down the generations. Your son would kill my son, and then my grandson would avenge. So a disastrous pattern of behavior, but which had been endemic for hundreds and perhaps thousands of years. And that's eradicated in Europe within 1 generation. So it's a shift out of a pretty dysfunctional set of norms. I mean, it is a norm that if my honor is aggrieved in order to get peer esteem, I better challenge you to a duel. And 2 things get rid of that norm. One is public action, so it's declared illegal. But that itself is not decisive. What's decisive is a shift between generations. So I challenge you to a duel, I'm an old guy, and I expect to win respect from you young guys for doing that. And then suddenly what takes root is, instead of the young guys looking to me and saying, my word, we respect him for doing that, you start to laugh. You say, this guy's an old idiot. He's just not got it. He's still living in the past. He's performing something that's ludicrous. So I fight a duel, even if I live, lo and behold, instead of getting peer esteem, I'm mocked. That's what gets rid of it fast. It's a change in attitudes across a generation, across a younger generation, which changes the incentives for the old. Pinker gives another example, really dramatic example, and has an ingenious explanation for it. And suppose it had been a wet Saturday afternoon in 1840, and I'd be wondering what to do with the kids in Oxford. I've got 3 kids and they're a nuisance. They want to be entertained. And so I talk to my wife and say, is there anything on? And we look, and she says, oh yeah, we're okay. There's a public hanging. Let's take the kids. And so we bundle the kids off to the city centre, and we watch the public hanging, and we all enjoy it. Now, by 1870, people are still being hung. So the punishment system stays the same, but it's no longer done in public. And so something between 1840 and 1870 radically changes people's perceptions that when they watch a hanging, instead of finding it suitable entertainment for themselves and the kids, they're revolted. And so what happens? And Pinker's explanation is that it's a byproduct of a fundamental public policy shift during the 19th century, which is the spread of mass literacy, mass education. Ordinary people can now read. Public education in the 19th century doesn't spread very far, but it spreads wide. So people are not in school for very many years, but they do learn how to read. And that creates a new market. What do people want to read? Not a textbook. They want to read stories. Remember? Stories are what's fun. And so the mid-19th century is the time of the mass market in the novel. And what is the novel? When you read a novel, a good novel, you put yourself in the position of the protagonist and live in their world. And across the 19th century novels, people are put into positions where they see the world from somebody else's perspective. The dominant British novelist of the time, Charles Dickens, described the experience of poverty. And so ordinary people were reading these novels and living as if through the eyes of people who were suffering. And that was a training in empathy, in seeing the world from a different perspective, from somebody else's perspective. And so in 1840, you'd look at somebody being hung and they'd be writhing at the end of a rope, but they would be the other. You wouldn't, as it were, feel that pain. By 1870, you'd be imagining yourself. I could be at the end of that rope. That person's pain could be mine. And Pinker thinks that's the shift that produced this revulsion from public hangings. The hangings still continued, so the punishment system stayed the same, but people were no longer prepared to watch.